Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us and bearing with us as we had a little bit of technical delays this morning. Welcome to the HubSpot Agency Expert webinar series. I'm delighted that you're joining us today, and I'm delighted that we've got Kyle Racky here today. Kyle is the CEO of Proposify, which is a software as a service company that allows companies to make better proposals faster and win more business. He's also a former agency owner, and today he's going to talk to us about streamlining your agency's sales process. If at any stage during this you'd like to join the conversation, feel free to jump in the chat or tweet us with hashtag Agency Expert Series, and we would love to get you involved. So without further ado, Kyle, I will hand it over to you.
Thank you, Lauren. Thank you for the great introduction. And for everybody who is attending this webinar, I appreciate your ear, and I want to make this as valuable as possible for you guys. So to kick it off, as Lauren mentioned, I used to run a web design and marketing agency. That was my first business. I ran it for about 5 years before selling it to focus on Proposify, my SaaS company. And back then, it was a real struggle running a web design agency. So I've got a lot of empathy for all of you out there running service businesses. They can be great businesses. They can be profitable when they're run really well. But I made a lot of mistakes when I ran my agency. So, for me and my business partner, Kevin, when we were running our agency, sales was kind of something that it just either happened or it didn't, right? There was no repeatable formula. We just hoped and prayed that we would get, somebody emailing us saying they were referred. And, we knew we had problems with our process or our lack of a process, but we just couldn't identify the missing pieces. So, what changed for us was once we started Proposify and we started scaling, we realized how important it is to have a repeatable business model, to have predictable leads coming into your pipeline. And another thing that we learned was we talked to multiple agency owners, over 100 on our podcast, the Proposify Biz Chat, over the last 3 years. And so we learned a lot of what we did wrong in the past and a lot of tips and strategies that can help agency owners have a more predictable business. So first of all, as we go through this, I want to make this as interactive as possible. So I'm going to put out a few scenarios, and I'd love it if you guys would comment, just leave a comment on which one sticks out the most to you, which is the biggest pain point for you guys. So assuming you can all hear me well and this is working, let's kick into it. So here were the problems that I had when I ran an agency. As I alluded to, we relied solely on word of mouth and referrals. We hoped that past clients would tell others about us, that our friends or people we knew in the community would just, pass our name around. Hey, these guys do good work. You should hire them. But if that didn't happen, then we really didn't have a lot of leads. So the other thing was that we did have a website that brought in some leads every month, but typically they were low quality leads. They were people, if they hadn't heard of us already or that we didn't have a warm intro, they were just Googling web design Halifax, which is where we live. And a lot of them were just kind of kicking the tires, just shopping around for prices. So we didn't have great quality leads coming through the website. The other thing was that often leads would come to us and say, we'd maybe get an email and say, so-and-so referred me to you. I've got a project that I want you guys to look at. Do you have time next week to sit down and grab coffee or grab a lunch? And I can tell you about the project. And more often than not, I would say yes to these lunches or these coffees and then spend maybe an hour or two with somebody, have a chat where they talk mostly about themselves. And then at the end of it, we'd sort of get into the details, and then they would tell me, oh, here's my budget, and it wasn't enough for us to work with. So I would spend too much time on bad leads before figuring out they weren't the right fit. The other problem was that proposals took a long time. So even if a lead got past that stage, they would say, hey, send us a proposal with some pricing. And then it might take us a week or two, sometimes more if it was a big proposal, to actually put it all together, to work it into our already busy schedules. it would be maybe us or an account manager working on the proposal, and it just took too long. And sometimes by the time you got a proposal in a lead's hands, it was too late, or the lead had gone cold or went elsewhere. And then the next problem we had was that deals just took too long to close. So we would get a proposal in somebody's hands. They would say, great, I'll talk to my people about it. I'll get back to you when we're ready to move ahead or make a decision. And then it would just sit there in the pipeline for sometimes weeks or months. And we would look at 90 days go by, this proposal's still in the pipeline. We're asking ourselves, should we follow up? Are they ever going to pull the trigger and move ahead? So I'd love to know from you guys, is there one of these problems that you're facing in your business? Which one is the biggest problem for you guys? So is it just relying solely on word of mouth, not having predictable leads? Is it the leads that come through your website aren't great quality, they're just price shopping? Is it that you're spending too much time only to figure out that a lead is bad? Is it the proposals take too long, or is it that the deals take too long to close? I'd love it if you guys would leave that in the comments. Lauren and her team at HubSpot are going through those, and they'll get back to you on that. So I'd love to hear your thoughts. So these were the problems that we were facing.
I can pop in.
Yeah.
We've got a couple people that are commenting on there.
Sure.
So we've got, somebody said, yep, the bad leads. Someone else, Brian, says, yeah, this describing us to a T. All of the above. Human nature, unfortunately. Somebody else, Todd, he is saying, yeah, the deal just takes too long. Tim is telling us low quality leads. So it sounds like quite a mix of all of these. Deals take too long to close. Relying on word of mouth can be a big problem because you can't control the volume. So I think it sounds like we're getting a lot more coming in now too. And it really sounds like what you're saying is resonating with them.
Excellent. Thanks for jumping in, Lauren.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so I'm going to talk through some things that will hopefully help you guys out with some of these problems that you can go and start applying today. So here are the 4 things that I really want to cover on this webinar, and I hope that you guys stay until the end. There's going to be a special offer that I want to get you guys in on, but here are the 4 things. So what I want to cover is how to consistently generate leads every week and not leave it up to chance, not leave it up to just word of mouth. I want to go through how to qualify leads and only spend time on the best fit in a way that doesn't lose or alienate a potentially good client. I want to talk about how to shave hours off your proposal process so you don't need to spend those 1 or 2 weeks that it might take to actually get a good proposal in a client's hands. And then finally, I want to talk about how to close every deal that you pitch within a week after sending the proposal. So I've got some strategies to share there. So let's jump into it, and let's talk first about generating leads. So I'm assuming if you guys know of HubSpot, many of you are probably HubSpot agency partners, then you already know how important inbound marketing is, and you probably execute it really well for your clients and bring them a ton of leads. Unfortunately, in my experience, agencies can be a little bit of the cobbler's kids having no shoes, right? Like, you know how to execute marketing for your clients, but you don't necessarily do a great job for yourself. And that's very common. So don't feel bad about that. It's more common than not. So, some of it comes down to putting together a strategy for your own agency and investing in your own marketing. So just to show you how common it is, once on our podcast, the Proposify Biz Chat, we talked to a guy named Simon Thompson who runs a company called Content Kite. And what his team did was they analyzed over 1,000 digital agency websites. And they wanted in particular to look at the blogs and see what they were doing from a blogging standpoint. So they would look at, agencies that don't have a blog at all, ones that have a blog, but they only post once a quarter, ones that have a blog and they post 1 to 3 times a quarter, which they consider poor. Some would post 1 to 3 times a month, which was okay, mediocre. And then the great blogs were the ones where they posted once a week or more. And it's pretty crazy when you look at 30% had no blog at all of the agencies that they analyzed. 36% only posted a few times a year, which I'm sure if you're an inbound marketing expert, is almost as good as not having a blog. If you're only posting a few times a year, it's not really going to do much for you. And then only 7% posted once a week. So, I mean, the lesson here is that you might think that agency blogs are very saturated and there's a lot of them, but there's actually a lot of room for opportunity because most of your competitors simply aren't doing it. So if you can even get to a point where you're posting once a week or even a few times a month, you're still doing better than over 90% of the digital agencies out there. So with that, with those stats in mind, let's jump into this. So assuming you guys know who your clients are, who's your ideal client that you work with, over and over again, and why do they pick you over your competitors? So, hopefully you guys know who your perfect client is. You've nailed down your target persona or your customer avatar, and you're not just targeting anyone or everyone who wants inbound marketing services, web design services, that kind of thing. Assuming you do, I want to talk about a foot in the door offer. This is something that I learned from Jason Swenk, who some of you may be familiar with. He's been on our podcast a couple of times, and he's a big fan of the foot in the door offer. So what do I mean by that? So when I say this, I'm not talking about a lead magnet, something that you give away for free just to get a lead's contact details. I'm really talking about an actual service, a paid service that's small enough that you can sell it fairly easily. It doesn't require a lot of layers of approval. But it's something that gets you in the door with the client working on them, or working with them rather. And then as you start working with this small project, then eventually you can upsell them to a retainer model, to an annual or a quarterly retainer. You can do a bigger web design build project with them. The world's your oyster at that point. But a lot of agencies, the problem that they have is they try to go in with the ask way too soon. So they'll get a lead in the door, they'll get on a call, and they'll start immediately trying to sell them on a monthly retainer when the client just isn't ready for that yet. They haven't seen the value. So think about how you can deliver a small project. So for many, that's an audit. It could be 1 month of services. It could be a strategy. I know when we ran my agency Headspace, we did discovery projects a lot. So that might be if somebody wanted a full app build, we wouldn't try to sell this massive software project. Instead, we would come in with just kind of the early stage discovery where we would figure out requirements, put together wireframes, and show them actually what the end product might look like. So think about how you can sell a foot in the door offer. So with that in mind, let's look at the different ways that you can generate leads every month. So as I said, a lot of agencies aren't doing blogs, and I want to hear in the comments, how often are you guys blogging for your own agency? Are you doing it at all? Are you doing it once a month? Let me know. So creating content that solves your customer's problem. So, I made the mistake in the past with my agency where I would create content, but it wasn't really for anybody who would be my ideal customer. So I might talk about some latest design tips or marketing tips, but it really wasn't targeted at any particular customer. So this is why it's so great to know who your ideal target is. If you go after people who are in the travel and tourism or hospitality space, well, then you can kind of more closely identify what their pain points are. So instead of just creating generic, the latest SEO tips kind of content, which there's great content out there already about that stuff, you can be way more specific and say, top ways to generate more bookings for your hotel, that kind of thing. So creating content, getting in the habit of doing that, and really carving that out as a project that you or somebody on your team works on every week. And then, of course, you want to promote the content. So you might be running some Facebook ads. You might be posting links to your articles in QA forums like Quora. That can be really effective because people are there actually looking for answers to problems or questions that they have. I think using a webinar for an agency is great. We had a guy named Zach Johnson on our podcast a little while ago who was using webinars really effectively to generate leads for his agency. So if you guys haven't got into webinars, definitely look into that because it's a great way to get a large number of leads on the phone. Show your expertise, show that your agency knows exactly how to solve their problem. And then finally, that's where we get to the foot in the door offer. So at the end of your webinar, you should be upselling people who are on your webinar to the foot in the door, a nice, small, easy project that's easy to close because it doesn't require a lot of approval, but it still gets you revenue and it gets you a customer in the door. So that's inbound. Then there's outbound strategies, and I'm going to kind of go through this fairly quickly because we don't have a ton of time. There's a bunch of other points that I want to cover. But essentially, outbound, you could be looking at creating lead lists. So again, knowing your ideal customer, using tools like Sales Navigator from LinkedIn. It's a great tool to be able to come up with lead lists of your ideal customer, find their email address. So don't contact through LinkedIn, just use LinkedIn to kind of find and gather the leads. You can use different tools out there. I know HubSpot's got great sales tools out there to find leads' email addresses and know if people open the emails. But basically, get your lead list and start emailing them. But the question is, what do you email them? So what a lot of agency owners do, if they're doing this at all, and a lot aren't, but how often have we gotten that in our inbox where it says, hey, we're a web design agency, or hey, we're a marketing agency, we'd love to help you. Those go in the trash, or those, you hit the spam button. There's nothing personal about them. So in my experience, what I've seen work really well is personalized lead magnets in an email. So if you've got a narrow target of people that you want to go after who would make perfect clients for your agency, instead of sending them something generic that gets ignored, send them something personalized that you can actually put together in something like a PDF, or even better, something that lives online that you can track and see if they're actually using it. So an example might be running their website through HubSpot's website optimizer and pulling together some things that they could do differently on their site to get more leads or get better conversion. That's just one idea, but I'm sure you guys can think of ideas that you can actually personalize for somebody as a cold email that warms them up, that gets them looking at it, and shows that you put in a little bit of work trying to understand who they are. Of course, if you get any takers on this, if anybody emails you back, the next step is to either get them on the webinar, where you can close the foot in the door, or just outright sell the foot in the door offer if there's some interest. So I want to hear from you guys what you think of that. Is that something that you can go and start applying now? And I also want to know, what is your biggest source of leads currently? Is it word of mouth? Are you getting referrals through HubSpot from people who know that they want to work with HubSpot and are actively looking for a HubSpot certified partner? Are you doing inbound marketing? Are you already getting leads through your inbound channels? Or are you really hitting the outbound model? Are you sending emails, doing cold calls, attending networking events? What is the biggest way that you guys are getting leads? I'd love to hear what you think in the comments. And Lauren, feel free to jump on as people start filling that out.
Yes, I will jump in here. It looks like, Brian is saying word of mouth. And people are definitely interested in your topic about blogging. We had a lot of people commenting in there about how it sounds like most of the people on this webinar blog at least once a week, some are 2 or 3 times a week. One question around blogging that you may be able to answer now before we get to the end here, since it's a little bit relevant at this time. Brian asked, do potential customers really read blogs? And he was saying his post really gets little engagement. So how do you think about that as far as the value of the blog?
I know for us, it's been probably the biggest, the most effective long-term strategy for our own company. And I realize we're running a SaaS business, so it might be a little bit different than an agency, but we're still selling B2B. We're still selling to companies. It's definitely disheartening when you start doing a blog, or even if you've been doing it for a little while and you don't get a whole ton of traction from it, because immediately we always want to be like number one on Google or getting, thousands of people sharing our content. But the reality is, I liken blogging to exercising. It's painful. You don't get results right away. Like, you don't get abs the first 2 months of going to the gym. So it's really a long-term commitment. And eventually, if it starts working, you might not be the top renowned blogger in a certain category, but you'll start to see that the people who do contact you or do ask for getting on the phone or being a lead, they might mention, and this has happened to me multiple times, there was a blog article that I thought nobody read, and somebody would email me and be like, oh, I love this article you wrote on this. This totally solved my problem. So you just never know. You put stuff out there, and if you're doing SEO on your blog, gradually long-term, maybe not when you first post it, but over 6 months or a year, maybe that post starts showing up number one for, a really relevant search. So I would just say keep putting in the work and keep trying to make the content better and more targeted. Does that help?
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. It's definitely a longer term strategy. Yeah, for sure. And then to get back to this question, what's your biggest source of leads? A lot more comments came in while you were answering that question. It looks like most people are saying word of mouth. Tim, Lisa, Brian. So word of mouth definitely seems to be the most common. We actually had someone, Angela said Google AdWords, and Peter's saying cold calling, and we've got George saying referrals. So really kind of the full gamut of everything mentioned on this slide.
Great. Well, at least, people are doing different things and seeing different levels of results. So I think the key is, word of mouth is great, and there's nothing wrong with having obviously clients and other people talking about you and saying, hey, work with this agency. But, I guess the key point here is that if you're relying on it and then a month goes by and you don't get anybody picking up the phone or sending you an email, that's when you start to worry. And that's where having something like 100 blog posts that are generating some level of traffic can start working as an actual lead gen tool. Okay, I'm going to move on. So that was lead generation. Now let's say you start employing some of these strategies and you start getting, a more of a steady stream of people contacting you. The problem I talked about before, of course, was spending way too long trying to figure out if it was a good lead. So, let's jump on, especially if it's a local client, they always want to meet, they want to grab coffee, they want to come to your office before you've even qualified them as a good lead. So this is where having a really solid process can save you tons of time from, eating up really sometimes half a day with a bad lead. So even with good tools and processes in place, proposals take a long time to create, right? So a good proposal will never convert a bad lead. And so you should really try to send proposals to as few leads as possible and make sure you're only sending it to them when they're really ready, like wallet out, ready to work with you. So this is where qualification comes into play. So the key point here, and this is something that I talked about on our podcast with a guy named Carmen, and he runs a HubSpot certified agency. And he actually started using this tactic of hiring a gatekeeper. I don't know if any of you guys have heard of this, but he has somebody that they internally refer to as the gatekeeper. Of course, that's not their client-facing title. But there's somebody who works at their agency whose sole job, other than creating content and doing internal marketing, is to basically field leads that come in, get them on the phone, and figure out very quickly whether or not they're a qualified lead. So you could do this for your agency if you've got somebody who can take on this role who's ideally not the founder, because if you're the founder, the owner of the agency, you really only want to be spending your time on closing high quality leads that are ready to work with you. You don't want to be spending your time. It's not a great use of your time to be spending it just talking to the tire kickers and trying to figure out if somebody's got a budget. Okay. So get somebody else doing that who's, professional, a biz dev pro who can field all these early stage leads and move them down the funnel. You could almost think of this person as your opener. So I don't know if you've ever looked at timeshares, or has anybody ever tried to sell you timeshares? I know it happened to me once when I was in Florida. I basically, to get these free like Universal Studios tickets, I had to get driven all around Orlando and shown all these timeshares, and the opener was just kind of showing them and going through them, and then at the end he introduced me to the closer, which was the guy who had his pencil out, who was slashing the price and really trying to close us. Now obviously you don't want to be kind of cheesy, but just internally think of your gatekeepers being your opener, and you as the founder or the owner of the agency is the closer. So first of all, you need to give your opener or your gatekeeper a qualification checklist. So if somebody emails you and says, hey, I want to start working with you guys, or hey, let's grab a coffee and we can chat about my next project, and you haven't qualified them, basically get your opener on the phone with them first for about anywhere from 10, 15, 20 minutes to ask these questions. So first of all, they're going to want to learn a little bit about the project, who the person is, what kind of company do they run. Next, you can ask questions like, internally, does this prospect align with your customer avatar? So if you haven't identified your avatar, do that. But once you've got one, you can really ask yourself, is this person my perfect customer, or am I just, kind of looking at somebody who is saying they want to work with us, but I don't see a fit? Can our services and expertise really help their problem and reach their goal? So I've had this where people come and they say, oh, I want to do a game or a video project. And really that wasn't our agency's core expertise. So we were kind of tempted to take it on and maybe hire freelancers. But really at the end of the day, if your services can't help this person, if you can't, if the goal is 10x their business, if you can't do that, then they're probably not the right fit to take on, because they're only going to be disappointed. It's only going to hurt your brand. Get to the budget as soon as possible. This is always hard, right? Because you ask a client their budget, they kind of dance around the subject, or they say they don't have a budget. They're just looking for prices. Sometimes they honestly don't know. Other times they're holding it back because they don't want you to throw out a number, or they don't want to throw out a number and have you think, oh, that's a great budget. Okay, we'll go with that, even though you could have done it for cheaper, which actually is the truth. And we all know that. So the way around this is to train your opener, to ask them first about the budget, see if they can get anything. And if they won't give their budget, tell them what typical projects cost. So if you say, okay, our usual, say it's the foot in the door, usually starts around 5 to 10K. Our retainer is, let's say, 20K a month. Just whatever that number is for you guys, talk about it early on, because if they don't have that budget, you don't want to spend more time going down the road with them. Of course, are you talking to the decision maker? Important question. Sometimes people get their office assistants or people who are a little bit lower, in the org chart, to go around and shop around for agencies so that they can just bring it all to the actual decision maker. That's not really something that's something your opener is going to really want to figure out early on. Is, are we going to be talking and pitching the person who's going to make the decision, or are they going to have to filter that and then pass that on the upper chain of command? This one's, super important, but sometimes we ignore those red flags early on. Maybe a client's inappropriate. Maybe you can tell they're disrespectful. Those are things to figure out early on, because you just don't want to be working with jerks. Difficult clients, challenging clients, maybe, sure. They're out there. Every client has its challenges, but you don't want to be working with somebody who you might need to fire down the road. And obviously, is this client just kicking tires? Can you tell? And this is a good one. Are we being invited to pitch against, are they actually looking at only a handful of pre-selected agencies, or are you basically pitching against anyone and everyone? Because you don't want to be getting involved in sort of like an RFP process if you've got no chance of winning it. So, there's probably more questions you could ask, but I want you guys to think about, how can you put together a checklist and train somebody on your team to do all this pre-qualification to you, so that if they pass the test, then you as the founder are only working on pitching high quality clients. Would love to hear what you guys think of that. And I also want to ask you, what's the biggest indicator for you that a lead is a good client? So is it the company size and revenue? Is it the industry or the problem fit? Something that you can solve their problem? Is it their budget strictly? Or is it just kind of a personality or something more kind of warm and fuzzy? So would love to hear what you guys think about that in the comments. And Lauren, feel free to jump in as people start answering that. So,
yep, I can jump in. A couple people it's a lot of dittos for what you were saying about budget. As far as somebody says, Brave Web says, I get up and walk out if the client won't share their budget. Another idea that came through that was interesting is Brian says we give tiers for pricing to just sort of see where they are. So we'll ask a question of like, is your budget 20K or 35K or 50K? So that way the client has a little bit more, they feel more control over it.
That's a great idea.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing I wanted to mention too was that if the opener, you should train your opener or your gatekeeper so that if the client actually does seem like a good fit, some people might ask, well, what's the next steps? So it would be try to sell that foot in the door offer first. So if you do like that discovery project or that audit or that strategy, whatever that small project is, try to train your opener to just sell them that right on the spot. So there's no proposal or there's very little effort in proposals. And, if the client's saying like, shut up and take my money, obviously, go ahead and sell the big project, but just try to get them in the door quickly and go from there. And if the client isn't a fit, then it's great to either just say, thanks for your interest, don't think we can help you, or maybe pass them off to somebody else who you think could match their budget. All right, let's move on to the next one. So in terms of streamlining your process and improving your sales process, obviously proposals are a big part of that. And I want to say, let's say that your ideal client said, yes, they want to work with you and you just need to put together some pricing. Sometimes you might be tempted to just throw together an email with like a few line items or do something really basic and simple. I still think it's important to put together a really good, solid proposal that maybe includes more information about your agency, your team that'll be working on it, having a good contract in place, just, more information that will give them a better way to decide on using your agency. So I think, preparing a thoughtful, beautifully presented proposal is a good part of that process. Now, where typically most companies will create their proposal, will be using InDesign or PowerPoint or Google Docs. And for a lot of people, that works really well. It still creates some friction. So this was really, and I don't want to sound too salesy here because obviously I run Proposify. So the reason I created it and the reason why I'm doing Proposify today was because I saw these problems in our own agency, and I see it in tons of other ones, is that they're using InDesign, which is really complex. It's made, mainly for designers. So there's a huge learning curve to using InDesign. It's great. You can get beautiful proposals, but it's a little bit hard to collaborate on with non-developer or non-designers. And then, as I said, collaboration. So you've sometimes got to save multiple versions of a file and pass it around Dropbox or that sort of thing. Using PowerPoint and Google Docs can work really well, but it's hard if you've got to kind of share, what was that old piece on branding that I used, 23 proposals ago? Where is that stored? And then just pull in that one section. And then finally, another problem is that you email your client this, 20 meg or more PDF, and you hope that it got through their inbox. You hope that they opened it, but you really have no idea. So this is where more and more companies are using proposal software. Now, acknowledging my own bias as the CEO of Proposify, obviously I would recommend looking at our software, but there's other software out there. We have competition. Proposal software is becoming more and more used in the agency markets and in a lot of other industries. So it's worth researching on your own, looking at some of the different proposal software providers out there and seeing what's the right fit for you. So one question I want to ask you as I go through this, if you want to leave this in the comments, is what is your least favorite part of proposals? So is it time spent in writing and scoping? Is it getting the pricing right? Is it the formatting or trying to design it and make it look good? Or is it just collaborating and being able to share pieces with different team members? I'd love to hear what you guys think. So as I mentioned, if you're looking and researching proposal software, here's some things that you guys should be looking at. Is something that lets you create templates so that you don't have to reinvent the wheel or just copy or duplicate old proposals and change them. So something that offers templates, something that lets you save items in the library is really important. So if you wanted to have like all of your case studies in the library ready to go, so you can just drag and drop them into your next proposal, that would be important. Your fees, your bios, all that kind of stuff. Variables is really cool too, because how many of you have accidentally sent a proposal that had the wrong client name or some other kind of embarrassing mishap? I know that's happened to me before. So that's why variables or short codes are really good, so that you can make sure that it always includes the right information. Integrations, proposal software integrates with HubSpot, CRM, Salesforce, other types of CRM and invoicing software. So that's another big benefit to it. And then notifications, like being able to send your client a nice, beautiful presentation they can open up on their phone or in a browser, and you can know when they opened it and where they looked. That's really, really important. So definitely look into proposal software. It's a great way to streamline your sales process. So I don't know if anybody mentioned anything in the comments of what they hate about proposals. I'd love if Lauren, if there's anything in there that people are mentioning, hop in.
Yeah, I'll jump in. But yeah, interesting. Karina says that the most challenging part for her agency is when she goes to meet with the client after she sent the proposal, but realizing that the client didn't actually read it or didn't pay attention to it in full until they're in that either face-to-face meeting or on the call. Do you have any suggestions of how you can kind of rectify that?
Yes, I do. In fact, it's the next section.
Okay, great.
So I'm going to answer that question right after this. Is there any other comment that anybody mentioned about proposals before we move on that we should cover?
Yeah, I mean, 3 people said the time, like the most challenging part is the time it takes to create them. So that seems to be a common one. And Lisa, spoken like a true agency professional, she says clients want free, in parentheses or in quotes, content ideas. So clients really want you to give them some great creative beforehand. So
spec work.
Yes. Yeah. Spec work. Exactly.
Yeah. That's not good. But yeah, people want it. I was once asked to like do up all the wireframes and designs and put that in a proposal. So it's annoying.
What do you say to that when someone asks you those types of things?
I used to say that's kind of like saying you want to hire a carpenter to build you a deck and say they need to build a few versions of the deck first, and you can just kind of pick and see which one you like and which one you want to go with, or not at all. And most people get that. They're like, okay, well, obviously you wouldn't ask somebody to do the work before they agree to work with you. Yeah,
that makes a lot of sense. Putting it in that like context of a physical product, right? I think we so often think of digital things differently than, like you're saying, like a deck. That makes a lot of sense to me.
Totally.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's move on to closing deals. I can't wait to tell people about this. So, the scenario that was painted in the comments, it's so common. You send the proposal, the client's like, okay, I want to see it. And then you send them the email with the PDF, and then you have no idea if they opened it, and maybe you book a meeting the next week to go and sort of talk about it or get them on the phone. So there's a way around this that if you employ it can actually help you get the deal closed within a short period of time. I say a week, it might be a little more, but if you employ some of these strategies, it should greatly shorten your sales cycle. So the first thing is, even though I've talked about using software to send the proposal, which a lot of people do because it's easy, it's in your best interest to schedule a call before they get to see the proposal. So this is a huge thing that's, it might mean that you need to send it out a little later. You might need to arrange a time with the client, but if you can get them on the phone, and only once they're on the phone do you hit send and get them that proposal in their hands, that's a major way to make sure that they've actually opened it and read it. And they might say, well, I want to look at it beforehand to, before I jump on the phone. Really try to say, I just want to walk you through this so you understand it. You'll have time afterwards to kind of look through it and then get back with any questions. But it's really important that I explain this to you on the phone or on a live, a live screen share, or in person if they're local, and really kind of just pitch this to you. And then again, you can take the time to do it. So this really works because it makes sure that the client doesn't just go straight to the pricing and ignores everything else. It makes sure that you can first be able to restate the problem that the client is facing and your unique approach or solution, right? Whereas you don't know if they're going to actually read that if you just send the proposal. So this is a great opportunity for you guys to be storytellers and really engage your clients on more of an emotional level rather than just giving them the cold, hard facts. I don't know if you guys have ever read the book Pitch Anything by Oren Klaff, but it's a great, I highly recommend it. It's a great book to talk about how to pitch effectively when you're trying to close big deals. And the other great thing about scheduling a call to pitch and walk through the proposal is if the client has any qualms or concerns, you can address them right there on the spot. So if they see something that they don't understand or that sticks out, they can say, hey, what about this? And it lets you be able to address it right there rather than just something they look at later on, and then it kind of gives them a reason to say no or to try to back out. So so that's kind of the one key strategy to closing the deals faster, is to not send the proposal, always pitch a phone call. The second one is to use scarcity and a time constraint to enforce a decision. A lot of people are afraid to do this, but it works. So just the same way you do that on maybe a landing page that shows you, oh, there's only 4 items left, or this offer expires in 2 days, that kind of thing. It also works when you close deals that way. So the way that you could employ a time constraint is at the end of your pitch. Let's say your client's asking questions, they're really engaged, they're excited to start work, so you can tell that this is going well. The way to kind of seal the deal isn't to ask for the sale right on the spot, because of course they're going to want to go back and look at the proposal in more detail, get some of their colleagues' feedback, maybe get approval or budget. But instead, what you can say is, hey, the team and I are really excited to get to work on executing this marketing strategy. Now, look, we have a lot of new clients starting this month, and we've only got so many people on the team. So I need to know really quickly if we're going to work together. Otherwise, we might not have the resources to take this on. Okay. So I need to hear back from you by next Tuesday at 5 p.m. I need to have a commitment that we're going to move ahead. And even better, if you're using proposal software or some kind of online contract, is just say, click on that signature button and seal the deal, and just let us know that we can do this, because otherwise we might be too tied up to work together. And if you have any questions in the meantime, let me know. You don't have to say exactly this. You can work in your own version of it, but make sure you give them about a week to make a decision, and let them know that they have to move. Otherwise, you can't take it on. So in their mind, this introduces scarcity. This means they're not going to sit on it for weeks. When the time comes and goes, you can say, hey, look, I didn't hear from you, so we're going to have to move on. Let them know the proposal could be null and void by after this date. Whatever way it works, just employing this time constraint forces your client to make a decision soon. And if they don't act, they miss out and you can't help them. And so what this does is it puts you as the agency in the driver's seat instead of at the mercy of the client and wondering when, or should I follow up? I don't know. I didn't hear from them. So make sure the client knows that after the time passes and you don't have a decision from them, you can't take them on. Now, you could sweeten the pot and you could introduce a value add service at no extra cost, or you could maybe give them their first month at a discount, some kind of little deal or little special offer to say you only get this if you say yes before the deadline. There's all kinds of ways you can employ that time constraint. So I just want to recap. I really appreciate your guys' attention. And I just want to kind of summarize what we talked about, which is using a combination of inbound and outbound strategies to sell foot in the door offers. So you get leads in the door with a small ask first, and then you can upsell them later on your bigger offer. Assigning an opener or a gatekeeper to act as the person who fields leads, and give them a checklist of questions to ask leads on the phone before any meetings are scheduled with you. Using proposal software instead of Word or InDesign or Google Docs, it can help streamline the proposal process, take a lot less time, reuse content, integrate with your tools, and present a more impressive client viewing experience. And finally, book meetings to present your proposals and introduce scarcity and time constraints, so your client has up to a week or so to make a decision. I hope some of these tips helped. I really want to thank you guys for watching. Thank you to HubSpot for hosting this webinar and inviting me to come on and talk with you guys. Before we get to Q&A, I just want to say that we recently launched a book called The Full Scale Agency that helps digital agency owners scale up their team, shows them how to do it profitably. So we're going to get you guys a link to download that, which is right there, proposify.biz/fullscaleagency. And also, if you guys are interested in signing up for a trial of Proposify and you're ready to upgrade, use the coupon code agency, or sorry, where is it? HubSpot Agency is the coupon code, and you guys will get a free month to use Proposify and try it out. Thank you again, Lauren. I'm going to hand it back over to you for Q&A or whatever else you want to do.
Great. Thank you so much, Kyle. Yeah, we'll go ahead and leave that slide up during the Q&A so people can write down that promo code to try out Proposify. And we just got one question and a bunch of dittos around it. from Brave Web again, and he's asking specifically about Proposify. So he's asking, does the software show a proposal and then expire it so that the client can't see it after a certain date?
That is actually a feature that a couple of people have asked for. We don't have that in place yet. It's something we may do in the future, but you can always put the expiration date in your proposal and then just archive it when that date goes by. And then that way, when they try to view it, it will say like, oh, this proposal's no longer valid.
Gotcha. Okay, gotcha. So there is a way to do that. You just need to manually kind of schedule yourself to archive it. That makes a lot of sense.
Yep.
Great. Great. And yeah, we've got a handful of questions, so we'll jump into those as well. This is a question from Squarely Digital. And the agency says, do you have any tips for upselling a client after you've done that foot in the door offer and you're delivering that service and then you're seeing a greater need? Like, how do you go about upselling that client?
So I think usually a good foot in the door offer would be something that naturally leads to the next sale. So it wouldn't be something where you just kind of solve all their problems and now there's nothing left to talk about. It's usually only the beginning of a project anyway. So what I used to do was, our foot in the door offer was a discovery process. I know a friend of mine who runs a app development agency. They call it a blueprint, and that's their foot in the door offer. So it's essentially a client is looking to build an iOS app, and the blueprint project is basically they come in, they do the discovery, they figure out kind of what the features or what the flow of it is going to be or what's needed to build. They'll do up the wireframes. They'll even talk to customers or users and do some testing. And then basically they give you this package. It's like your blueprint that you can now go and hire any agency, any development company to build this project. You've done basically the first part of it for them. Naturally, as you've been working together on the project, you're building up trust with them. You're trying to help save them money. Sometimes you're saying, oh, maybe this feature isn't quite needed. I think it's going to be really expensive and a lot of users aren't going to use it anyway. There's different ways to build trust with clients during this process. And every time I've used it for myself, if the client goes ahead and builds that project or builds that app, they're almost always going to say, okay, we're just going to get you guys to do it. So it's kind of a natural upsell.
Yep, that makes a lot of sense to really set it up from the get-go as to really be that natural upsell, like you're saying. A couple other questions we got around the conversation about spec work. How do you feel about disclaimers in the spec work if someone's really asking for, some kind of work up front in that proposal process? Do you offer disclaimers? Is that something you guys do, or you've done previously when you were an agency owner?
I think spec work is just for me anyway, it's something that you just shouldn't do. I would rather lose the client than do spec work. So I would use that analogy about the carpenter. Like, you don't just, or an architect, you don't say, oh, well, just give us the designs and then we'll decide if we want to buy them, because it takes you time to do it. What I could maybe do sometimes is like offer a little bit of a high level direction or idea or strategy of like, okay, here's your problem. Here's how you guys want to get leads in the door. Here's our approach to solving the problem. And I would include that in the proposal. And it's high level enough that, okay, if they don't end up going with it, that's the way it is. But you don't give away something like wireframes or your first blog post will just include in the proposal so you can see how we write. Like, that's where case studies come into play. If you're like, you need to see what we do in order to decide if we're the right fit. Here's 3 case studies of how we help companies exactly like you. And here are the actual deliverables we gave them. And then they can get a sense of like, okay, I like their work or I like their approach.
Yes, that makes a lot of sense to me. That's great. Another question from Angela. This was earlier on the broadcast, but what do you do if you think a client is asking for a proposal and they want to shop it around with other agencies?
If I knew that, like if they had more or less outright told me that, or I had some way of indicating that, I would probably not give it to them. I mean, there are always exceptions to the rule, but if they want to shop it around in a way that's kind of their right to do, it would be good to kind of get a sense of who you're up against. Like, what kind of agencies are you talking to? Is it something like, are they using your proposal and comparing it with maybe 2 or 3 others that are, it's an apples to apples comparison? I mean, that's okay. That's in the client's best interest to do. It's kind of, for me, it's where it's like a research project. You don't want to be spending time on a proposal where the client is never going to buy from anybody. They really just want to see what this costs, and they have no intention of ever proceeding with it.
Yep. Yeah, that's great. I think that makes a lot of sense as well. We just got another question from Brian. So he says, what is your advice for hiring an awesome business development director?
I always think it's best for an agency to hire somebody who's an expert, or at least is very knowledgeable about what your agency does. So as opposed to hiring somebody who's purely a salesman or a saleswoman, and that's their core skill, I would rather hire somebody who, let's say you're an inbound marketing agency, hire somebody who actually is a marketer or has done a lot of marketing in the past, because they're going to resonate more with potential clients and leads than somebody who knows nothing. And, clients can tell when like a salesperson is kind of faking it. So hiring somebody who really knows, because that way that opener or that gatekeeper knows a lot about marketing. They know about digital. Maybe they're HubSpot certified. They've taken the course. They can talk the talk, but they also have some soft skills, when it comes to sales and when it comes to following up on leads. And they're very, they're good salespeople. Trying to find that hybrid, I would say, is the best way to do it. They might be a little hard to find, but that's probably the best person than just a pure biz dev person.
That's great. That's great advice. That's really great advice, because it is someone that really has done those services before, maybe in a different context when they were actually the person executing on it, if they were a marketer before.
Yeah.
That's great. This question came really early on in the broadcast, but what advice do you have for an agency who is in the early stages of figuring out their buyer personas?
I think you should go through all of your past clients, every single person you've worked for before and taken on, and put them in a spreadsheet and start looking at what industry were they in, how big was the business, what roughly did they do in revenue, which you can find all that out through HubSpot CRM if you put in their domains. I'm sure most people know that. And I would also put in things in the spreadsheet, like on a scale of 1 to 5, like how did the project go? Were was everybody super stoked? Was the client really happy with the end results? And I also put in profitability, like was the client a pain to deal with, or did they, were they relatively easy to work with and you made money off the project? And if you've worked with enough clients, like even if there's 20 or 30 in there, you'll start to see patterns, and you'll start to realize, like, oh, I never realized it, but we actually worked with a lot of healthcare companies, or we worked with, the best companies we worked with were in the sort of $5 to $10 million revenue range. But when we started going above that, those projects were a huge pain to close. Like, you'll start to uncover patterns. So I'd say take all your past clients, put them in a spreadsheet, and see what pops out.
That's so smart to really put it kind of in plain terms. I can totally imagine a spreadsheet with all these different columns, and it would be really easy to see those patterns.
Oh, and the great thing is, their email addresses, and you can put those into LinkedIn Sales Navigator, and you can put them into Facebook audiences. So you can start retargeting similar companies.
Yes, like a lookalike audience in Facebook ads. Yeah, for sure. Oh, that's great. Well, what a great question to end on. We are bumping up right to the end of the hour here. So thank you so much, Kyle, for joining us. This was great information. I certainly learned something on the other end of the line. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. You guys had such great banter back and forth. We had someone, after the question about hiring, someone else piped in and said, hey, call me and hire me. So there's lots of great conversation in the chat pane. So just thank you guys so much for your time today. We've recorded this session, and we'll send it out tomorrow with the slides as well as this coupon code, so you guys can have that in your inbox as well, so you can look for that tomorrow. Great. Well, thank you, everyone, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, guys.